Seoul's hand connected with Zara's cheek so fast the crystal glass on the counter was still spinning when the sound hit the wall, and Zara stood there, gray smock, burning face, and said absolutely nothing, because what do you say when your bank account is empty? Your mother is sick, and the man whose name is on this penthouse just heard everything from the hallway and poured himself a drink instead? She needed this job more than she needed her dignity, and she had been telling herself that for 8 months, but the man in the supermarket who watched her calculate 67 grocery items in her head without touching her phone, who looked at her face instead of her uniform and asked if she was all right like he genuinely needed to know, that man is about to make a phone call that Minjun Baek is not ready for. If you're already feeling something, you're in the right place. Subscribe right now and choose your side in the comments. Did Minjun deserve to lose everything, or was he just weak? We don't do slow stories here. Now let's go. The glass didn't even break. That was the thing Zara kept coming back to afterward, sitting on the edge of her small bed in the service room, her cheek still hot, the sounds of Seoul and Minjun's dinner conversation floating down the hallway like nothing had happened. The glass had spun on the counter and settled and stayed whole, and Seoul had looked at it, and then looked at Zara and said, very calmly, "Be more careful," and walked back to the living room. And Zara had picked the glass up and placed it back precisely where it belonged and stood at the counter for 10 seconds breathing through her nose, and then walked to her room and sat down and did the math in her head the way she always did when things got bad. Her mother's next treatment in 19 days, the cost, the balance in her account, the number of weeks between now and enough. The math always won. The math was why she was still here. She had come to Seoul 14 months ago with a contact number and a plan that made sense in Lagos and made slightly less sense once she arrived. The job through the agency had been legitimate, Minjun Baek's household, good pay, private accommodation, 1 day off per week. She had been grateful. She had been professional. She had been so careful not to take up more space than she was given. For the first 6 months it was manageable. Minjun was absent more than present, his offices across the city, his business trips, his dinners. He was not unkind to her. He was not anything to her. She was the woman who kept his penthouse running, and he was the man who made sure the agency payment cleared every month, and that was the whole of what they were to each other. Until Seoul. Seoul Yoon arrived on a Saturday in a white coat and heels that cost more than Zara's monthly salary, with 4 suitcases and the focused energy of a woman installing herself permanently. She was beautiful in the way that required significant daily maintenance, and she knew exactly how to dress a room and exactly how to make another woman feel like a smudge on the wall. The first week was just looks. Long assessing ones that started at Zara's face and ended at her feet, taking inventory. The second week was tasks. Not requests, placements, instructions delivered while looking at her phone, the list expanding slightly every day. Extra polishing. Flowers replaced more frequently. The balcony tiles scrubbed by hand. Seoul's wardrobe steamed and organized by color, and then reorganized by occasion when the first system wasn't quite right. By the 4th week Zara's 1 day off had quietly become a half day. She did not know how to say this out loud to anyone, so she said it to no one. Minjun noticed nothing. Or Minjun noticed, and the math he was doing in his head, his relationship, his peace, his household running smoothly, came out the same way Zara's did. The math won. He looked away. The food started in week 5. Seoul began preparing a separate plate for Zara's meals. She announced this pleasantly, as a consideration, so you don't have to wait for us to finish, and set it on the service kitchen counter with a smile. The first plate was fine. The second had rice that was slightly off. By the 3rd week, Zara was eating food that Seoul would never have placed in front of a guest, and she was eating it because the alternative was cooking for herself with groceries she'd have to buy herself, and everyone mattered right now. She told herself it was temporary. 19 days. 14 days. 9 days. Then Zara's clothes disappeared. She came back from her half-day off to find her 2 good outfits gone from the wardrobe. In their place, folded neatly, 2 gray shapeless smocks, the kind worn by maintenance workers in large buildings. A note in Seoul's handwriting. *uniforms. More professional for your role. *. Zara stood at the wardrobe for a long time. She put on the smock. She went and finished the floors. That was the night she called her mother and said everything was going well, Seoul was good, the job was stable. Her mother said she sounded tired. Zara said she was just adjusting to the hours. They talked about her brother's exam results and her mother's next appointment and the mango tree in the yard that had finally fruited again. She hung up and sat in her gray smock in her service room in a Seoul penthouse and looked at the wall. She was still looking at the wall when she heard Minjun and Seoul laughing about something in the living room, the television low, domestic and warm, and she thought, not for the first time, what it would feel like to matter to someone in a room. Are you choosing sides yet? Drop it in the comments right now, Team Zara, or are you still giving Minjun a chance to fix this? Subscribe if you're staying, because it gets so much worse before it gets better. The slap happened on a Tuesday. Seoul was at the kitchen island eating breakfast and scrolling her phone, and Zara was cleaning around her the way she had learned to clean around Seoul, making herself small and quiet and efficient, disturbing nothing. She was wiping the counter behind the fruit bowl when her elbow caught the edge of Seoul's glass, a thin-stemmed crystal piece that Seoul had bought specifically and mentioned twice, and it spun. It did not fall. It spun and caught itself on a slight ridge in the marble and sat there, rocking, perfectly intact. Seoul's hand moved before the glass stopped rocking. Open palm. Across Zara's left cheek. Not a slap born of rage, too controlled for rage. A slap of correction, the kind delivered to something that has made an error. Measured. Decisive. Zara's head turned with it. She said nothing. The sound of it sat in the kitchen like something spilled. Seoul looked at her with the calm of someone who has not exceeded their own expectations of themselves. Be more careful, she said, and went back to her phone. Zara straightened. She picked up the cloth. She finished the counter. She walked to her room and sat on her bed and held her own face in both hands and breathed 4 counts in, 4 counts out, until the burning stopped being the loudest thing. She did not cry. She hadn't cried in 4 months. She wasn't sure the machinery still worked. She sat there until the math reassembled itself. 9 days. Her mother's treatment. The balance in the account. 9 days, and then she could recalibrate. She went back out and finished the kitchen. 3 days later, Seoul sent her to the wholesale supermarket across the city. The list was 2 pages long. The time given was 3 hours. The bus would take 40 minutes each way. Seoul handed her the list and the budget, cash exact, with no margin, and told her to be back before the afternoon guests arrived and to wear her uniform. It was the uniform that was the point. Zara understood this the way she had come to understand everything Seoul did. The cruelty was always architectural, always deniable, always dressed as something practical. The supermarket on a Saturday morning would be full of people. The uniform was gray and shapeless and worn. The shoes Zara had left were canvas and scuffed because her good ones had gone with the outfits. She went. Because 9 days. Because the supermarket was crowded and bright and loud with weekend energy. Zara moved through it with her list and her budget and the careful internal calculator she had been running since she was 16 years old and helping her mother stretch the housekeeping money in Lagos. She had always been good at this, the mental arithmetic of surviving on exact amounts, finding the version of the thing that cost less without costing too much in quality. It was a skill nobody had ever called a skill. She was in the imported goods aisle, comparing 2 brands of olive oil and calculating the per milliliter cost of each, when she reached for the higher shelf and her fingertips fell short by 3 inches. A hand came from beside her, unhurried, certain, and lifted the bottle down. She turned. He was not what the supermarket deserved. Tall, 60 years old, silver hair cut close and neat, dark eyes that moved over the aisle with the practiced assessment of someone who evaluated everything as a matter of professional habit. A long dark coat, well-fitted. A face that had strong bones and a healed scar along the left jaw that his obvious wealth had clearly decided not to cosmetically correct because he had decided it wasn't a problem. He held out the bottle. Thank you, she said, and turned back to her list. He didn't move. You were calculating, he said. She looked up. Sorry. The per unit cost. You didn't use your phone once. You've been doing it in your head since that aisle back there. He nodded in the direction she'd come from. You're good at it. Zara looked at him. In 8 months, nobody had noticed anything she did except when she did it wrong. I've had practice, she said. He studied her face with the directness of a man who had long since stopped pretending to look at anything other than what he was actually looking at. Are you all right? He said. 2 words. 4 syllables. Delivered without performance, without the social obligation behind which people usually asked the question they did not want answered. Something moved in her chest, deep and sudden, like a floorboard settling. I'm fine, she said, because that was the only answer she had left that still fit her mouth without breaking. He nodded slowly, the nod of a man who believed her approximately 0% and had decided not to press it. He reached into his coat and produced a card, plain, heavy stock, just a number, and held it out. If you need anything, he said. Nothing else. No explanation, no sales pitch, no condition attached. She took it. She didn't know why she took it. He moved past her down the aisle and was gone. She stood in the imported goods section of a Seoul supermarket in a gray smock and scuffed shoes with a card in her hand, and she looked at it for 3 full seconds before putting it in her pocket and going back to the list. She went home. Seoul counted the change. It was 2-1 short, 2-1, less than a fraction of a cent converted, the rounding error of a long mental calculation across 67 items. And Seoul made her stand in the entry hallway and explain herself for 15 minutes while the grocery bags sat on the floor between them and Minjun's keys were on the console table, which meant he was home. Which meant he was somewhere in this apartment while this was happening. He did not come to the hallway. Zara explained herself. She apologized. She stood there until Seoul was satisfied and walked away, and then she picked up the groceries and carried them to the kitchen and began unpacking them, item by item, with steady hands. That night she took the card out of her pocket and sat with it on her bed. Just sat with it. She didn't make any decisions. She just held it and thought about a man in a supermarket who asked if she was all right, like her answer was going to determine something. She put it under her mattress and went to sleep. Song Tae-oh did not forget faces. By Monday morning he knew her name, her nationality, her agency contract details, which household she worked in, and who owned that household. He had people who found things not intrusively, not illegally, just efficiently, the way an organization that operated in the spaces between official structures learned to gather information the way other people gathered groceries. What they brought back made him sit very still at his desk for a long time. He was 60 years old. He had seen cruelty in forms that would rearrange the average person's understanding of what humans were capable of. He was not a man who was easily disturbed. He was disturbed. He sent one message to the number on the card he'd handed her. The card is still good. She did not respond. He put his phone face down on the desk and thought about the per-unit cost calculation and the way she looked at him when he asked if she was all right, not the answer she gave him, but the half-second before the answer. The half-second where something true flickered before the automatic response arrived. He was patient. He had always been patient. Patience was how you built things that lasted. He began making calls. In the penthouse, Zara's mother's next treatment was in 5 days, and the account balance had a gap in it, a gap that had appeared because the agency had held one payment pending a contract review that Seoul had apparently requested. A detail nobody had told Zara. She found out from the hospital calling her directly. She sat in the service bathroom with the door locked and her phone in both hands, and she looked at the notification from the hospital and the number of days until treatment and the balance in her account, and for the first time in months the math did not add up. She sat there for 4 minutes. Then she got the card from under her mattress. He answered on the second ring. "It's Zara," she said. "From the supermarket." "I know," he said. She had prepared a speech careful, professional, transactional, minimizing. She opened her mouth to deliver it, and what came out instead was, "My mother is sick and her payment didn't clear, and I don't know who else to call, and I'm sorry for bothering you." Silence. Not an uncomfortable one. A listening one. "Which hospital?" he said. She gave him the name. He asked for the account reference. She gave him that too. She could hear him doing something, typing, or instructing someone. She couldn't tell. "Give it 20 minutes," he said. "I'll pay you back," she said immediately. "I will, I just need Zara." His voice was not sharp. It was even, which was more effective. "Give it 20 minutes." She waited in the service bathroom with the door locked. 18 minutes later, the hospital sent a payment confirmation to her phone. She pressed her forehead against the cool tiled wall and breathed. Her phone lit up with a message. Asterisk, don't thank me. Just eat something today, asterisk. She looked at the message for a long time. She got up. She went to the kitchen. Seoul's designated plate for her was on the service counter, rice from 2 days ago, and something that had turned at the edges. She picked it up. She looked at it. She put it in the bin. She opened the refrigerator that held Minjun's household groceries, and she made herself a proper meal for the first time in 3 weeks, slowly and deliberately, and she sat at the service kitchen table and ate it like she was worth feeding. This is what beginning to remember yourself looks like. It is not dramatic. It is a woman making rice and sitting down. Comment right now, was this the turning point? Because everything after this moment is a different story. And if you're not subscribed, do it now, because the next part is where Song Tae-oh makes his move and Minjun finally runs out of things to look away from. Song Tae-oh called Minjun Baek's assistant on a Wednesday and requested a lunch, framed as a casual business connection, the kind of framing that left no reasonable room for refusal. Minjun accepted within the hour because you did not decline Song Tae-oh's lunch invitations and remain comfortable. They sat in a private room of a restaurant in Gangnam and talked about several things: a development project, a mutual contact in Busan, the quarters numbers in a sector they both touched at different ends. Minjun was good in rooms like this. He had done it long enough to be relaxed. Then Song Tae-oh set down his glass and said, with the pleasantness of someone discussing the weather, "I believe you have a young woman working in your household." Nigerian. Remarkable person. Minjun went very still. "She works for me, yes," he said carefully. "I met her briefly," Song Tae-oh said. "She made an impression." He lifted his glass again. "I hope she's being treated well." The sentence was 9 words long, and it contained a question and a statement and a warning, and Song Tae-oh delivered all 3 of them with the same pleasant expression and then moved on to the dessert menu. Minjun went home that evening with a specific quality of discomfort that he could not shake by the time the elevator opened to his penthouse floor. Zara was cleaning the hallway when he arrived. Gray smock. Hair tied back. She moved aside to let him pass and he stopped. He looked at her, actually looked, the way he had been successfully not doing for months. The smock. The tiredness. The careful way she held herself. The particular posture of a person who has learned to take up precise minimum space. "Are you all right?" he said. She looked up at him. The question sat between them. He had asked it before, reflexively, socially, the way you asked it without wanting the weight of the real answer. But something in his face tonight was different. Something that looked, finally, like the discomfort of a man who had been avoiding a mirror and had just been made to stand in front of one. She could have said fine. She had said fine so many times the word had lost its shape. "No," she said. Just that. 1 syllable. But she said it steadily, looking directly at him, and it was the first honest word she had given anyone in this apartment in 8 months, and it cost her something and also cost her nothing because she was done, she realized. She was done with the math that required her to subtract herself. Minjun stood in his hallway and the things he had been looking away from came into the room all at once: the smock, the food, the slap he had heard and walked away from, the way his girlfriend spoke to this woman, the way this woman had quietly reorganized her whole existence around surviving inside his house, and his own participation in all of it through the simple mechanism of his silence. He was a man of significant resources and significant cowardice, and they had balanced each other out for too long. "Where are your clothes?" he said. "Your own clothes." Zara said nothing. She looked at him. He looked at the smock. He walked past her to the living room where Seoul was on the phone, laughing, one leg folded under her on his sofa, entirely at ease in a space she had curated to her exact preferences. "Seoul," he said. She held up one finger, finishing her call. He waited. When she hung up, she looked at him with the smooth expression of a woman who is not concerned. Zara's clothes, he said. Where are they? A pause. I organized the household uniforms. It's more professional. They're her clothes, he said. Not household uniforms. Her personal clothes. Seoul's expression shifted by a fraction. Minjun, she's the help. I don't understand why you're. I heard what happened in the kitchen on Tuesday, he said. Silence. I walked away from it, he said. That's on me. But it does not happen in my house again. Seoul stood up slowly. She was very good at this, the measured escalation, the way she could make a room feel like she was the aggrieved party in any situation. So you're choosing the cleaner. I'm choosing basic decency, he said. Which should not require choosing. If she stays, Seoul said, very clearly I leave. The room was quiet. Minjun looked at the woman he had been dating for 2 years, polished, beautiful, strategic, and a person who had slapped an employee in his kitchen and left her spoiled food and taken her clothes, and he had known, and said nothing. I'll have someone help you pack, he said. Seoul's composure held for exactly 3 more seconds. Then it didn't. She said several things, some in Korean, some directed at Zara who had appeared in the doorway, some at Minjun, and all of them were true in the way that things said in the loss of composure are true. She had known about Zara. She had always known. Not the full truth of it, but enough, and her cruelty had been built on that knowing. She left 40 minutes later. The penthouse was very quiet. Minjun stood in the living room that Seoul had curated and looked at it, and felt the specific hollow of a man who had done the right thing 8 months late. He found Zara in the service kitchen. You should move to one of the proper guest rooms, he said. The service room is... I'm leaving, she said. He stopped. I appreciate what you just did, she said. She was folding a cloth on the counter, her hands moving with the automatic habit of someone who has cleaned for so long the motion has become meditative. I know it cost you something. But I've been making myself smaller in this apartment for 8 months, and that doesn't stop being true because Seoul is gone. She set the cloth down. You heard what happened in the kitchen. You had your keys on the table. You poured a drink. He didn't deny it. I need to go somewhere I don't have to survive, she said. She went to her room. The bag took 11 minutes to pack because she didn't have much. She came back down the hallway with it on her shoulder, and Minjun was standing by the door, and he looked like a man who had several things to say and the self-awareness to know none of them had the right to be said tonight. I'm sorry, he said. I know, she said. She pressed the elevator button. Zara. His voice was quiet. You were never just the cleaner. I want you to know I knew that. She looked at him. That's the part that made it worse, she said. The elevator opened. She got in. She rode down 42 floors and walked out into the Seoul evening with her bag on her shoulder and 11 months of compression sitting in her chest, and she stood on the pavement and breathed the outside air and thought, now what? The car was parked across the street. She noticed it because it was still, a black car, no plates visible, in a city where everything moved. The window came down. Song Tae-oh looked at her across the street with the expression of a man who had calculated where she would be and when, and was not surprised to have calculated correctly. She crossed the street slowly. I didn't call you, she said. No, he agreed. So how did you? I pay attention, he said simply. She looked at him for a long moment. In the streetlight, his silver hair and the scar and the dark coat made him look like something the city had built specifically. He was 60 years old, and he was looking at her like she was the most uncomplicated thing he had encountered in years, which was strange because she felt like the most complicated she had ever been. I don't need rescuing, she said. I know that, he said. I watched you rescue yourself. A pause. I'm not here to rescue you. I'm here because you're the most interesting person I've met in 10 years, and I would like to take you to dinner. A real restaurant. Where you sit at the table and order from the menu. She looked down at herself. The gray smock. The scuffed shoes. The bag that held everything she owned in Seoul. I look like someone who just left a war, she said. You look like someone who just won one, he said. She was quiet for a moment. The city moved around them, Seoul in the evening, indifferent and luminous and enormous. I want to change first, she said. There's time, he said. She got in the car. And that, not the dinner, Not whatever came after, but the moment she got in the car on her own terms with her own bag and her own decision, that was the moment Zara Okonkwo stopped surviving and started something else entirely. What that something else looked like was a story for the next chapter. But it started here, with a woman who had been called the cleaner for 8 months sitting in a car next to a man who had never once looked at her clothes and deciding, for the first time in a long time, that the math didn't have to be about subtraction anymore. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know which side you're on. Drop it in the comments. Did Minjun deserve one more chance, or did he use all of them up in that hallway? Like this video because Zara earned it. Subscribe because the next story hits just as hard and we are just getting started. We read every single comment and we will see you in the next one.